Hey everyone, welcome to class. I'm glad that you're here. My name is Jesslyn and I'm going to be your teacher for this class, Drawing Realistic Birds. In this class, we're going to use birds from all over the world over the course of 5 weeks to learn about not just drawing birds, but to learn a technique that you can use to draw other things, as well as how to think like an artist so that you can become the artist that you want to be. Let's start by talking about what to expect in these class videos. Each week, our class is going to be broken down into 2 parts. First learning and then drawing. I know that you're ready to get to the fun part, the drawing, but I don't want you to think that the second video is more important than the first, because the goal of our class is not to come away with 5 beautiful bird drawings. The goal of this class is that you begin to think like an artist so that you can go away and you can begin to do this anytime you want with any bird or any subject that you want without having to follow a guided drawing. So I want to tell you a few things about artists before we get started. Number 1, we make better art as artists when we enjoy ourselves. And that's not just because I want you to have a good time. I do want you to have a good time. But has anyone ever told you that artists are actually supposed to draw from their shoulder? Well, we are. We're supposed to have loose muscles. We're supposed to use sweeping motions and draw from our shoulder. So I want you to do this with your wrist and then do this with your shoulder. And I want you to feel the difference in your body. When we get frustrated, our body actually tenses up. I don't know if you can think about the last time you got frustrated with a sibling or a friend. You probably didn't even notice it, but your muscles probably tensed up a little bit. And when our muscles tense up, so does our shoulder, so does our wrists. And when we're tense, that actually makes it harder for us to draw well. The reason that I'm telling you this is because sometimes students get frustrated. When we're learning a new skill, it can be really frustrating when we can't do it perfectly well the very first time we try. So today, I'm telling you this so that you can remember that in this class, we are aiming for practice, not perfection. If you do find yourself getting frustrated, I want you to stop, take a breath, and remember you can pause, go back and repeat, or take a break in these videos. You are learning something new. When we learn something new, we're not guaranteed to be really good at it the first time we try. What we want to focus on is, are you learning the steps so that the next time you try it, you can do it even better? The second thing I want to share with you about artists is that for most of us, the hardest part of any drawing is getting started. The way we're going to learn to draw in this class is a way that we can get rid of that scary blank page in a place where we have room to make mistakes before we go on. Today when we draw, we're going to draw in 2 parts. First a sketch, and then the second part of the drawing is where we get to do the artistic part. First, we're going to fix our outline. Then we're going to get to move on to the shading and the details, the fun parts. The second part is where we're going to start to see our bird become more realistic. It's the part that most of us think of when we think of doing drawings. We're going to start with what I like to call a basic map sketch. Now, I call it a basic sketch because we are going to use basic shapes that you already know how to draw. Do you know how to draw a circle? Yes, I know you did. Do you know how to draw triangles, a rectangle, ovals? Of course you do. We have been drawing these things since we were very young. And we're going to let them help us take something that's more complicated, like the shape of a bird, and give our brain something it recognizes like basic shapes. The reason I call it a map sketch is because if you're going to get in the car and go to a place that you've never been before, are you going to take off and just start guessing which road to take and which direction to go? No. You're going to get out a map. You're going to look at all the lines that are going to take you where you want to go, right? You're going to see it from start to finish so you understand where you're going. That's why we call this a map sketch, because we're using these basic shapes to create a map for ourselves. We're going to talk more about sketches in a little bit. But for now, I want to give you my goals for this 5-week class. My first goal is to start to change the way you look at the world. I want to help you start thinking like an artist. My second goal is that I'd like to help you become the artist that you want to be. And what that means is I want to help you get through some of the hang-ups and some of the frustrations that happen when you start to learn a new skill or when you start to try to improve a skill. I want to help you start thinking about your art like it is an opportunity to get better, not just an opportunity to come away with a pretty picture. And then, of course, number 3, I want you to draw better. This is number 3 on my list of 3. And it's not because I don't care or it's not important, but it's because goals 1 and 2, those are the things that are actually going to elevate you from the artist that you are today toward the artist that you really want to be. Each week, we're going to have a Think Like an Artist section of our learning video. And the reason that we're doing this is because you may think that you have to have a natural talent to be good at art, but that's not true. People who have a natural talent at art are not necessarily the people who become the best artists. What if I could give you a pair of glasses that changed the way you saw the world and made you a better artist just by putting them on? That's what we do in the Think Like an Artist section. What we are trying to do is we're focusing on our mentality, the way we view the world, and how resilient we are to keep practicing through failure. Why do artists start with a sketch? We start with a sketch to get all of our mistakes out of the way. I want you to think about our sketches like a safe place to make mistakes. This is your safe zone. Because when you know that it's okay to make mistakes, it frees you to keep trying. And in practice, if you want to get better at something, you have to try and you have to be willing to make mistakes. You don't just learn something and instantly become really good at it, do you? There's a secret that great artists know, and that is that if we want to do realistic art, we have to draw what we see, not what we know. What does that mean? Well, for instance, we all know that a bird is covered in what? Feathers. Young artists and new artists will often come in and say, okay, birds are covered in feathers. I need to draw feathers on this bird to make it look realistic. So they come in and they do this. But that doesn't look like the bird in the photograph, does it? That is not what a bird looks like to us. So let's see, we can zoom in here and we have this handy ability that I can trace over what we actually see. Look at what we see. We see lines, hash lines, squiggle marks, V shapes. We're not seeing the shape of feathers. What we're seeing is the shadow that the feathers on top are casting on the feathers on bottom. And it makes these little suggestions of feathers. Suggestion means that instead of giving someone the whole picture, so instead of drawing a whole feather, we suggest to them that there are feathers by drawing these lines without drawing the whole feather. This happens in fur, this happens in feathers, this happens in hair, this happens in all kinds of textures. That if we draw what we know to be there, what our brain tells us is there, that says, okay, the bird is covered in feathers, let's draw feathers. Our art is actually going to look less realistic than if we look really closely with our eyes and we ignore what our brain wants us to do. We ignore the fact that our brain knows that this is a feather, which sounds really funny, doesn't it, to ignore your brain? So now let's go in on this and let's add some of these hash marks in. I've got squiggle marks kind of loosely done. I have lines in a row. I have little areas of dark feather shapes. But we're not putting any feathers in. We're just suggesting the feathers, right? You've seen this done in art all the time. It's just that you're not aware that that's what's happening. Here's another great example. Let's take a look at the color of this bird. What color is this bird? We know that it's what? We know that this is a blue bird. The same thing that happens when we look at feathers, our brain says, okay, we have a blue bird here. And in our minds, we say, I need to come in and I need to fill this in as a blue bird in the color that I see. But what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to use this handy tool where if I hold my finger down on a section of this image, it will select the color that's in the image. And by doing that, what I'm going to be able to show you is this is not just a solid blue bird. Let's see what happens. When I move over to the section where the sun is hitting it, look how much lighter that part is. Now look how much darker the shadow side is.
Those are three very different colors, very different values. They're all the same indigo bunting. And in our minds, we know that the feathers on this bird are all the same. This indigo bunting does not have a pattern of light blue, dark blue. It's a solid color. So if we want to draw this blue bird in a way that is going to look like what we see in real life, we have to do the same thing when we're drawing our birds, when we're coloring our birds. That means we have to train ourselves. This is not natural for us. We don't pay attention in normal life to what our brain is seeing because our brain is made to take shadows and highlights, lines, different values of dark and light, and create images out of it. That's the way we perceive the world. So our brain is doing exactly what it is meant to do. But when you're an artist, sometimes you have to turn that off, and that takes practice. So quickly here, I'm filling in these colors. I'm selecting the colors that we found, and I'm filling it in the areas that I find it. And look what happens. Do you remember the blue that I filled in first? This looks much more realistic. So this is what we mean by draw what you see, not what you know. I'm going to say that to you over and over and over the 5 weeks that we're going to be drawing. Because if there's one trick that you need to remember in order to draw realistic art, it's that you need to observe, you need to notice. What I'm going to have you do in our artwork is try to turn the part of your brain off that can recognize this as a bird and start looking at it as shape, line, and color. Yes, it's great to have natural talent in art, but you don't have to have natural talent to be good at art. You have to have the tricks and the tools that mimic real life. I know you're ready to draw, but the first thing that we have to do is we have to learn to see these basic shapes in the objects that we're trying to draw. So let's take a look. I'm going to get us started with a few simple circles. Now stop and think for a minute. There are 3 very important circles: the head, the body. Can you think of another circle that's really, really important on a bird? It's the eye. With just 3 circles, we have a large part of this bird already sketched in. Now let's find some triangles. I'll get us started with the little bitty beak. When I say triangles, yes, I mean this, but I also mean this, and I might mean this, and this. It might even be a curvy shape. What's another area you can find a very important triangle or V shape on a bird? The wing, exactly. Let's move on now. Let me tell you something so interesting about this chickadee's tail. When I ask students to tell me what shape they see in this tail, I have some students who will say an oval. I have some students who will say a rectangle. And I have some students who say even a skinny little triangle. That's important to us because it shows us that there isn't a right answer. This isn't about correctly identifying the shapes in a bird. What it is it's your brain's way of understanding something complex and making it more simple. When we try to recognize things that we already know well in something that we're drawing, it makes it so much easier for our brain to actually see what's in front of us and process that. Now, there's also going to be some rectangles in our birds. For instance, a bird's legs are these teensy tiny little tubes, so we'll often see rectangles down around the legs. I need to tell you just for a brief minute about the feet. We could spend an entire lesson on just learning about birds' feet. We could learn how they look, we could learn how they work, but I can almost guarantee you that every time you see a bird, either in real life or in a photograph, it's going to look different. And most of the time, it's going to look just like a dark mass of shapes. Maybe like this or like this. But for our purpose today, we're not going to spend a lot of time. We're going to try to identify the shape that we see and draw it. And you'll see in the drawings, I don't even add a lot of detail. Lastly, one important place you might find a triangle is where the tail and the body meet, because we're using this oval shape to create a bird's body. That kind of makes it a bit disconnected from the tail. So if you look closely, you can see under the wing, it forms this sort of triangle shape. So now look, I'm going to take away this background photo and look what we have. With just a few circles, a few triangles and V-shapes, a few ovals and rectangles, we have a very informative sketch of a chickadee. We can see how big the head is compared to the body. We can see how big the beak is and which direction it's facing, how long the legs are, how long the tail is, what shape it is, where the wings go. I'm going to turn the image back on and I'm going to do the American robin the same way we did the chickadee. I'm going to do it really quickly so we have the ability to see why this is so important. Now, I'm going to take away the image again and look what we have here. We have done almost the exact same combination of shapes for the chickadee and the robin, and look how different they are. Well, it's important for us because we have the ability with just a few shapes to get a lot of valuable information in our sketch. Look at the difference between the chickadee and the robin. I want to do a little test. I'm going to come down here and all I'm going to do are the circles and the ovals for the body and head. And I want you to tell me which sketch is the robin and which sketch is the chickadee. Can you guess? That's right. Circles number 1, that's a robin. Circles number 2, that's a chickadee. How do you know that? The reason that you can tell which one is a chickadee and which one is going to be a robin with only 2 circles is because we can see that the chickadee's head is really large for its body. So we draw an oval that's really large for the size of the oval for the body. But we can look at the robin and see that's a little bitty head for the size of its body. I want you to take this worksheet and I want you to finish it. Trace over the shapes that you see in the house finch and the indigo bunting. You don't have to trace really specifically to the outline of our bird. We're not trying to create an outline. I want you to trace the basic shapes. So in the head, I want you to use a simple circle. In the body, I want you to use a simple oval. I want you to try to simplify it the way we simplify it in our sketch. Okay, you did awesome. We're at the end of our first video. We had a lot of things we had to introduce, a lot of things we had to talk about, and we learned a lot of things. Before we go on to the guided drawing, I want you to remember that you can stop, take a breath, and repeat. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed, if you find yourself getting frustrated, stop the video, tell yourself, practice, not perfection. And I want you to remember that you do not have to understand or remember everything yet. That's really important as we go through this class. If you can't take all of it in today, that's okay. Some of these things are things that adults around you don't know yet. And that should make you feel a little bit better if sometimes they don't make sense right away. There's 2 things that I want you to do each week. The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to do a self-assessment. So each week I would like you to gently critique yourself and share in the post on the classroom. The 3 things you're going to do in your critique is number 1, I want you to find something positive. What is something that I did well in this drawing? A lot of us are really hard on ourselves, and it's hard for us to look at the things we do and feel good about them. For some of us, it actually takes practice to be able to see the good things about what we've done. Number 2, I want you to ask yourself, what is something that I could improve? We want to have a mindset that says, yes, I did a really good job, but I could also improve. And number 3, I want you to ask yourself, what is something that I noticed or felt during this week's lesson or drawing? I want you to notice any signs of frustration, any signs of feeling like you want to give up. We want to notice those things. As your teacher, I don't get to be there with you while you're taking this class. I don't get to see your face. I don't get to see you draw. So I use this question so that I can know how I need to encourage you. The first video of your lesson is done. The next thing you're going to do is your guided drawing video for this week. I'll see you there.